Okay, thanks very much. Lana has asked me to talk about cyberspace, cyber threats, and the Internet of Things, those sorts of issues, which are definitely global and definitely going to have an impact on your profession. I guess the main thing I want to say is that the most important thing that I think you need to keep in mind with cyberspace issues is that the game is not settling. It's not. We haven't, as it were, reached an equilibrium after a very rocky and rapid start off in the emergence of cyberspace and using the internet for commerce, business, government, and social needs. Where we're actually just at the beginning of a process. So there's that aspect of it that it's still undergoing rapid change. So some of the verities that were hard won over the last 10 or 15 years are now going to be challenged anew. The second thing is about these changes is that they're not what scientists like me would call linear. They're non-linear. They are step changes in the sense that they're very jerky and they're often very rapid, and the situation changes from something which we seem to understand to something which looks quite novel and very different very quickly. In particular, there's the thing that, or the phenomenon that people are calling the Internet of Things, which is really something bigger than the Internet of Things, which is the migration of digital objects that can talk to each other in cyberspace, which hitherto have been human beings talking through their computers or their phones, or basically talking through machines that they control, to a whole array of machines talking to machines through cyberspace without any human intervention. So we're talking, and the current ones that are getting a lot of press are things like drones, autonomous cars, things like that. But they're only the tip of the iceberg, as it were. The whole world is going to be tiled with a range of new devices that talk to each other independently of humans, and do things and make decisions and take actions, and that's going to lead to very disruptive activities in cyberspace, and thereby bear down on all businesses, including the legal profession. That said, there are going to be huge opportunities for business and huge opportunities for the law, because we don't understand the legal ramifications of these gadgets and devices and interconnections that are just rushing at us out of the labs and technology companies at the moment. Two things we need to think about. One is that as we expand the number of devices that are sitting out there in cyberspace, we're going from billions of people talking to each other to hundreds and perhaps thousands of billions, trillions of objects that are going to talk to each other. What the cybersecurity people call the attack surface is going to expand hugely. In other words, the opportunities for bad people to do bad things is going to be greatly magnified. So in that sense, the risks will grow. And the second thing that's going to happen is that we're starting to see is that there are going to be entirely new vectors, new ways in which to make mischief. Up until a couple of years ago, we thought that malware, particular sorts of malware, DDoS attacks and so on were what were going to be the things. Now we're seeing things like ransomware, where someone gets into your system and locks it down, and you have to pay to get it unlocked. It's a new form of Danegels that we never thought of. But I'm just raising the ransomware issue mainly because it's a beautiful example of something we didn't think about. We weren't prepared for ransomware, and it's all over the place now. So what will be the next unusual, novel black swan to come and make our lives miserable? That's on one side. On the other side, as I said, there are vast business opportunities, both in terms of the way you do business, the way legal firms can do business in particular, but also in the types of business that you can do, because this is going to, just like the cyber world expanded the possibilities of what we could do, this new jump to the Internet of Things is going to expand it again. And so I think we're in for a rocky, really interesting ride over the next 5 years.
I don't know whether I should be excited or worried.
Both.
I think that's right. Ransomware is the sort of the latest concern, not just generally, but also the legal profession, particularly the importance that lawyers place on the confidentiality of their clients' information, which they've got stored. Do you have any suggestions as to what lawyers and legal firms should be doing to try and avoid that situation?
I think one of the issues that lawyers and law firms, particularly small to medium firms, really need to think about is that they'll be seen as a backdoor into larger enterprises, because often they have privileged access into their clients' systems in various ways. They talk very closely and confidentially with them. So if I was a Chinese hacker and I wanted to find out about what was really going on with Rio Tinto, I think I'd be looking at some of the law firms that Rio Tinto discusses things with, go through them into the corporate counsel inside the law firm, inside Rio Tinto, and then spread my probes out from that through the whole company. Often, so it's not only the fact that the law firms themselves may hold very confidential information of the client, in other words, discussions in progress, contract negotiations, and so forth. It's that they're a conduit for nefarious types to get into their main target. Now, it will often be the case that the smaller the firm, say it's a small law firm advising some branch of Rio Tinto in Queensland, for example, say where the main office, not the main office of Rio Tinto and not the main office of a law firm, but it's something going on there. They would find that as a very useful way to try and get into the main operation. And you'd expect, or you would often anticipate from what we know, is that those smaller firms might have might not be as locked down as larger law firms might be, and not as locked down as something like a big international corporation is. So they're a soft underbelly.
Are there any risks for large firms?
Yes. I would guess that the risks are less, but anything that's connected to the internet is at continuing risk and needs continuing monitoring. There was an interesting. I saw an interesting discussion a couple of years ago where some fellow was lamenting, how do I lock my computer down? And this very technical person from the US who worked in one of the big US national labs said, you can unplug that computer from the internet, you can lower it into a concrete lined pit and cover it in concrete, and he said, and I can still get into it. So it's very hard. So it's a continuing game we're playing. We just have to be vigilant. We have to try and have the best tools and protection that we can get at any time, but realise that it's an arms race.
Are you aware of of universities actually, as part of their curriculum for undergraduates, explaining these risks to their students, or are they learning on the job once they leave once they leave law school?
That's a good point. We're starting to teach it to the master's level now, and trying to explain those risks to them at master's level. It's not very common for it to be described in at the undergraduate level. And part of the problem is because these sorts of skill sets and knowledge is very siloed in universities. The knowledge of how to protect yourself comes from outfits like the computer science faculty or a college like ours, National Security College, and the legal faculty doesn't talk to them very much. At the master's level, they're starting to talk, and they're starting to see that we do need to have this integration. ANU, and this isn't an advertisement because it's happening in other universities as well, I believe. ANU is realising this is a problem, and they're starting to push it down to the undergraduate level. So we're on our campus, where we've got the National Security College, the College of Law, and the College of Engineering and Computer Science working together to create an undergraduate stream where the undergraduates get exposure across all the dimensions of cyber, so that they can just have some perspective on the problems and how fast they're changing.
Can I just ask you if law firms were not doing enough to protect their systems from a cyber attack, and a bad person got access to client information and then into the client themselves, it seems to me that legal practices could be exposing themselves to claims by clients if they're not getting up to speed with these kind of issues, and ensuring that their systems are as good as they can be in the circumstances.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. You guys are the lawyers. I'm not. But certainly these sorts of attacks, I think the sorts of attacks that law firms will be exposed to will be things like ransomware, where they're trying to sort of create a lock out your systems because that's your lifeblood, and force you to pay. That's one style. But the other sort of attack will be to get information, whereas denial of service attacks for people in the retail sector or something like that would be a more obvious style of attack. I think they'll be after your knowledge, your private knowledge, and so they'll go in and they'll be very, very stealthy. A lot of cyber attacks are very noisy, and good cybersecurity can pick them up. They can see them coming in. You need to have a level of cybersecurity above the level that retailers have, and much more like the banks have, because they're trying to steal your crown jewels.
Like Gary said earlier, I don't know whether to be afraid or excited, but I think I'll go with your advice and go with both. We've got a significant cohort of in-house practitioners. These are the lawyers who work in-house for the companies that you say might be, quite valuable for information. What role do you see these in-house lawyers can do, not only for their own client business, but also in terms of liaising with the smaller to medium-sized private law firms that are being briefed by these businesses? Yeah,
good question. I think one of the things that corporate counsel will have will be access to knowledge, or at least familiarity with very good cybersecurity practice. the level of practice that's going on inside a Rio Tinto or a BHP or something like that. So that'll be part of the culture of that place. They need to, as it were, transmit that culture and transmit that knowledge to their smaller outside partners and say, we think this is important. This is the way we do it here. You guys need to sort of rise up to this level. One of the things that's happening in the big corporations now is that cyber is percolating up to be a board level matter. It used to be regarded as something that the IT department did. Now it's becoming a little bit. It's becoming an issue of the Chief Information Officer, but the Chief Information Officer reporting to the board. The board wants to know routinely how it's going, because the boards are realizing that this stuff is bet the company stuff. So that culture is starting to percolate through some of our major international corporations. We need to get that attitude appropriately scaled back to the smaller entities that are interacting with these big companies, particularly if they're going to be holding valuable information of the major company, and which, in the case of legal firms, they will be.
Just thinking through that advice, one simple way that could be done is having lots of in-house lawyers tender for a panel of law firms, and perhaps having a contractual term that their cybersecurity systems be at least at a minimum level might be one very simple way of transmitting that down.
Yeah, it'd be certainly a way of doing it. The trick would be not making it so difficult, such a high hurdle that companies that you wish to work with can't meet it, at least initially. I think it might be more a case of you work with them to lift them up. If you want to work with law firm X and you're a big multinational, it's in your interest to try and help them lift their cybersecurity up to a level that makes you comfortable.